Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Leslie Haley, Supervisor in the Midlothian District, and we're going to talk about our budget tonight. And so this is one of many community meetings we're holding. We're holding these virtually, Facebook Live, also on our partner stations, on YouTube, so lots of opportunities. I think this is a great way for us to reach so many of you. And we may, take this as an opportunity to, even in the future, look at new ways to engage. So you're going to have an opportunity tonight also to post questions either on Facebook or post questions also through Blueprint. And if you come up with questions after the presentation, please don't hesitate to reach out to one of us, because that's what we're here for. Now, we are still in budget discussions. We are not anticipating, we'll go through at the end, the timeline of when the board will actually take action on the budget. So there still are opportunities for us to make modifications and to hear from you. And that's what we're really hoping to do. We really want to hear from our citizens. You will see in tonight's presentation, and I think if you're paying attention, we really have this year made a very concentrated effort to invest in our people, to invest in our public safety folks, to invest in our teachers on the school side, to invest now in studying also the rest of our personnel, both school and county side. And I think that that's a long overdue commitment, and it's something that I commend not just our board for doing, but also our finance folks for putting together the correct package. Because, as you can imagine, the real question of dealing with these issues of pay and pay compression is not a one-year issue. It's a commitment to continue the process of making certain that those pay issues are addressed on an annual basis, or we're going to find ourselves right back in the same issue of compression. So first of all, I want to say thanks for joining us. Again, feel free to pose questions. We will address those at the end, and I will turn it over right now to Gerard, or to, Mr. Harris. To Mr. Harris.
We'll get it figured out. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. We're going to walk you through, for the remainder of the time here, as we did last year, and this is our third one of these this year, we have a brief PowerPoint presentation. This is really a summary document of a much broader and deeper set of materials that are available online. The Board of Supervisors saw the full presentation last week in this room, and saw the full presentation, and we've been having other work sessions as well, including today at the Finance Committee. So we're just going to go through and hit kind of the highlights, but again, check out the Blueprint Chesterfield website, chesterfield.gov. You can get into all the specifics. This is not intended to hit that level of detail, but I think it does provide a nice broad overview of the fiscal 22 budget, and just a little bit of housekeeping. And I know we say that every year, but for those of you that are just tuning in for the first time, we are talking about fiscal 22, which begins for us on July the 1st this upcoming year. So we have a 6-month head start on the calendar year. So that's what we're talking about. And just to reiterate a little bit, you're seeing tonight the county administrator's proposed budget that is now before the Board of Supervisors. So this is a really important time in the process. And I think we've done a good job of pivoting, here in Chesterfield County to a 365-day-esque type budget exercise. We're making major investments throughout the course of the year based on feedback and economic conditions. So tonight is, in the next couple weeks, by no means represent the full slate of opportunities for the public to have their voices heard. But this is a major, opportunity. So the board is here tonight. All 5 board members are hosting one of these community conversations. Ensure opportunity to get some of that feedback to them directly, and still have those changes incorporated into their ultimately adopted budget, which is scheduled for April the 7th. So with that, I'm going to jump into the presentation itself. Again, we're talking about fiscal 22. This is just the proposed budget. This is just what the county administrator has, based on a year's worth of feedback from the community, has put in front of the Board of Supervisors. Discussion outline, we'll hit on all these major themes. We are going to start a little bit, as we always do, talking about the economic backdrop, which I think is really important, particularly this year, given a lot of things that are going on with the pandemic. And we're going to touch on the operating budget overview. And Mr. Durkin, our budget director, will jump in. We'll talk about the capital side, too. I think the budget this time of year too often is focused on positions and raises and those types of things, but and I think that's really a byproduct of the way that we present it. But all of these pieces and parts are before the board: the capital plan, county and schools; the operating budget, county and schools; as well as the utility budget. Doesn't get as much attention, but I think we all understand the absolute importance of clean drinking water. We've seen what impact it can have on communities when they don't have that or have disruptions in service. So, the budget really represents that point in the year where we're making those major investments in our water and sewer infrastructure. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well, and then wrap up with an overview on the bond referendum, or the proposed bond referendum. There's been a lot of questions around that. I think it's probably the one single point of this financial plan that's where there's the most confusion, so we will spend a little bit of time on that, and then we'll get right into to your questions, and we'll go as long as we need to go, up until 8 o'clock this evening. So again, I think the economic backdrop here is really important, and the overarching message, not to get too spun down in any details necessarily, is the fact that we believe that the economic conditions, the backdrop, the fundamentals that support any financial plan are strong enough in Chesterfield County, really in the region, and in the state to a great extent, has had a lot of positive economic headlines, even in recent days and weeks. So we believe very strongly in those economic fundamentals, and that's where we begin. We have to make sure we're putting forth a plan that's responsible, something that we can sustain, not only for 12 months, but for, as Ms. Haley said, some of these pay plans, those things are with us for a long, long time, and we need to make sure that if we're going to make such landmark investments that we can come back next year and the year after that and sustain those and make sure we continue to make those investments. So the economic backdrop is even more important given that, and the fact that COVID, from an economic perspective, hit us very hard a year ago. Largely, those impacts have washed over us, and I think this chart, we included this one because I think it does a good representation of that. You see the massive spike in unemployment, nationally raising up to, almost 15%, but it was a very short-lived spike, and you've seen, not the same time period, but really a very close time period in terms of recovery, where it has fallen right back down into, historically speaking, are healthy ranges of unemployment. That typically, you like to see that around 4% plus or minus. In the county, we're back down to 4.3. But we did see that big spike a year ago that lasted, 60, 90 days. But the duration has not been what we've seen in prior recessions. And that's why we show you here the longer time series. You look back at 2007, 2008, it's extended, in the 6 to 8% range for years. This recession, still a recession, but the duration of that disruption from an economic perspective only lasts 60 to 90 days. Doesn't mean there aren't pockets of the community, small businesses, those on fixed income that are still feeling the impacts of the COVID recession, and this budget is also attentive to that. But by and large, broadly speaking, we have good, solid economic footing to move forward here. This chart is not the most exciting one in the deck, but it is really important, and I'm going to spend a moment here because I think, and the budget staff that's in the room can feels this one the most when it comes up here, because really in the course of 12 months, we've put 4 budgets forward because of COVID, because of our response to COVID, and then our sort of very slow and conservative, cautious recovery plan from COVID. So let me just walk you through these 5 numbers and give you some sense of what we're looking at here. So starting on the far left-hand side, the fiscal 20 adopted number, and again, just a little bit of background is important. You see that 733, so well, what is that? We have the budget. I'm talking primarily about the general fund budget, which houses all of our traditional local government responsibilities: public safety, parks, libraries, social services, all of those kinds of customer-facing businesses, as well as the local support for education. The education budget is made up of roughly 50% state and 50% local. These figures here are all of those traditional functions plus our 50%, our share, if you will, of education funding. So just to kind of give you some context of what you're looking at. So in fiscal 20, normal year, that was adopted at $733 million. And we'll show you a few places in the next couple slides how that breaks down, what the 733 pays for, and give you a better sense of it. But for now, just think of it as kind of that top line number. A year ago, a little more than a year ago now, I guess, we proposed in this same kind of format. The first couple community meetings actually were pre-COVID. We proposed a 21 budget at $773 million, which is a 5% increase over the prior year, a pretty normal amount of budget growth, no big deal. And then COVID hits. That chart we just looked at, unemployment, within a couple of days, really, spikes up. The job losses begin to pile up. We huddled back with the board, huddled back with the community, extended our community outreach period, and we cut over $50 million out of that proposed number. So 773, unfortunately, had a very short life, and we had to put that one to rest very quickly, and came back and adopted at 721, which cut $50+ million of expected spending, and actually was lower than we were the year before at 733. So we took a very conservative approach. Didn't have a whole lot of data points. It's tough on the Board of Supervisors, on the school board, everyone else trying to figure out what to do when you've only really got 2 to maybe 4 weeks of data to go on and no precedence from a historical perspective. So cut a tremendous amount out of the budget, over $50 million. But we're able to keep a lot of parts intact. School transfer, for example, the additional money invested in schools still increased by $10 million, despite the fact that we were able to cut over $50 million from all of the other areas. So that's where we ended up 721, knowing that it probably was lower than we needed to go, but we just did not want to come back and make consecutive or additional rounds of reductions to the budget. That was really important to the board. They wanted to get down to the lowest point and then build back if we could, as opposed to having to continue to take stuff away, and I think that was a smart approach. So then what you see there in that revised column back in November, December, we came back, we had more data points, we had more economic experience, and we came back and said, this thing is better than we expected. We can put some money back in the 21 budget. The public safety pay plan was turned on in December. A lot of things were restored. We had over 800 positions on the general fund side that were either furloughed positions or we just could not hire them. We unfroze all of that so operations could get back to as normal as possible. And we said, we're probably somewhere in the 750 to 760 range. Flash forward to today, what we're talking about sitting here, the fiscal 22 proposed, the final number in this series, 806. It's a big increase from 721. If you've read any of the stories, seen the news headlines, they like to, circle around that difference between 806 and 721 and the percentage increase associated with it, which is over 11%, which is admittedly a large increase for Chesterfield County. But the long short of this slide is it's a 2-year increase. It's not 806 versus 721. If you look at 806 versus 773, where we thought we'd be, we're on normal track. So 806 versus 721 really represents 24 months of budget growth, and we've had a lot of parts of the local economy, housing market, consumer spending, whatever you want to look at, that have been very strong, and again, justify this kind of increase. But again, don't get caught up in a large percentage increase in a headline that is trying to just get some additional clicks. When you drill down into it and understand that it's 2 consecutive budgets rolled into one, it makes a lot more sense from a numerical perspective. So revenue overview, I'll just hit this one really close. $84 million is the increase from 22 proposed to where we were at 721. This just shows you the major sources. Where does that growth come from? The two to really pay attention to: real estate taxes. The home market in Chesterfield County has continued to be a place people want to come, they want to live here, they want to raise a family, they want to retire, they want to stay. We've seen a lot of forces at play there. Home values appreciating over 4% over the course of the last year. That's what the $35 million is largely from. And then consumer spending. You know, a nice byproduct of COVID is folks stayed home, but their dollar stayed home with them. We've thought for a very long time that with our population base, the largest in the region, we really are the consumer spending engine for Central Virginia. But, you know, our folks like to share. They like to go out and shop and eat in lots of places. But I think what we've proven over the COVID period of time is that we have a lot of nice options here. And folks, again, not necessarily wanting to stretch away as far from home as they normally would. We've seen double-digit increases in sales tax really throughout the course of COVID, and I think that's just a reflection of folks staying closer to home, investing in Chesterfield, shopping Chesterfield, eating Chesterfield, all of those things, and we hope to retain some of that activity moving forward because I think we've proven that out to our residents and to the business community that if you come here, if you open a new restaurant, a new store, a new shop, whatever it is, you can do really well in Chesterfield County. I think that bodes well for us moving forward. So just going to touch on this very, very quickly in terms of the state pressure. But, you know, it's because this is not a topic that we often touch on and something we're going to get more information out about and just be more vocal about. You know, the state, you know, is our parent, if you will, in terms of permissibilities and many revenue lines, so forth and so on. And sometimes, you know, we get good news from them, but sometimes, you know, we don't get good news from them. And that has an impact on our ability at the local level to deliver services and or to, you know, depending on which way you want to look at, to reduce taxes. So this chart, and I won't, again, go into every line, but the work session that I referenced earlier that happened in the first week of March really went through this in great detail. Again, we did some of this today at the Audit and Finance Committee. If you stay with us, if you follow the county, you're going to hear more and more information on this topic. But if you add up all of those things, and let's just work the right hand of the side of the chart, there's $13.6 million of things that we've documented here, either revenues where the state has taken money away, not lived up to a funding formula, or has passed along expenditure mandates that we don't get a choice in at the local level. Those add up to $13.6 million. I think all we want to do with this chart is just kind of get question, you know, posed in the back of people's minds. What does this budget look like with $13.6 million of additional services and programs? Or what does this budget look like proposed instead of at 95 cents at 91 cents? You know, what does that look like from an economic development perspective? I think those are questions that we're going to hear us talk about more and more. But again, the state does have the actions that happen downtown, the impact of those is often felt at the local level, and we just want to be more vocal about that. Major components, again, I referenced this a second ago. So, you know, what is in the overall budget? So let's just walk through this really quickly. The schools piece, now that 810 is the local half that comes out of the general fund, plus that, you know, our state friends do pay a chunk of the school budget. So when you add those two together, the overall budget, the consolidated budget, invest $810 million, or is proposed to invest $810 million in our school system. The general fund, which we've been talking about exclusively up to this point, once you pull out the school piece and shift it over to the left, $461 million to cover everything else that we do from a local government perspective. And then lastly, again, something we're trying to focus more on, the utility system, your water and sewer infrastructure, one of the best systems in the nation, $142 million to invest there. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Durkin, who is going to walk you through some more specific pieces, including some of the motivations from a programmatic perspective for the operating budget. Mr. Durkin.
Thank you. Good evening. The pictures that you see before you, what were really the drivers and factors of our plan over the last 12 months? And the main theme to take away from this slide is that, we've not just reacted from COVID, but we've learned from it. We've learned our customer preferences, what's really important to them, and how can we do businesses differently. And there'll be some examples in the next few slides about how we responded to that over the last 12 months. Demographics is another factor that we look at. You know, our single family growth has been healthy over the last few years. It's nothing like the 2008 bubble that you see on the chart on the left, where it's approaching about 3%, but we are growing, but it's at a more sustainable rate. The bottom chart you see is the percent of single family units where there's a county student in that household. The decline in the percent is not due to the decline in the enrollment, but a demographic shift in the residents wanting to stay here for the long run, in particular that 65 plus age group. Our student enrollment base is growing, but we need to be cognizant of the fact that our service portfolio needs to reflect the diversity of the community which we serve. In this chart that you see before you, I'm sure many of you have seen it multiple times, is the dollar bill. How do we spend those dollars that are entrusted to us? We spend, in our proposed budget, 78 cents in every dollar on the key three components of our local government, our education, public safety and capital. 2 years ago that was about 76 cents. That 2 cent movement may not seem a lot, but with the numbers that are in this budget, that is a big increase in investment. And, you know, the running of our general government, you can see that it's 6 cents for every dollar. That includes functions like, you know, accounting, procurement, our budget functions. And by keeping those operations lean and efficient, we can put more money back into other areas of our government, you know, including public safety, education, parks, libraries, etc. So when the 22 budget that you see before you today really builds on the investments that the board had made in the amended 2021 budget. When we build our budget every year, we look at our base. We did the exact same thing this year. And when we looked at restoring some of the reductions that we made in fiscal year 21, you know, simply restoring what we cut it's the easiest thing to do, but isn't the right thing to do. And so we looked back at our line items and we looked through everything and we looked for efficiencies throughout this budget. And we used our investment that we've made in technology over the last few years to do some long-term analysis. And before coming back to you, the taxpayer, where can we find efficiencies within our existing resources to pivot to those service enhancements that we're making that are in our proposed 22 budget? And the chart that you see before you are just some examples of the investments that we've been able to make with those efficiencies, from general services to in-source some custodial and painting services, to our real estate assessment office. They've made a major investment in technology that freed up some personnel dollars. And fire, we've been able to return some firefighters back to mainline operations by in-housing training. And then libraries, which is something that we'll talk about in a few slides, moving that part-time to full-time ratio that we started with in 21 has realised some efficiencies while also being able to extend our service quality with our library system. And the chart there, which shows you the total of all those requests, if we hadn't been able to find those efficiencies, was about $1.6 million. We're able to find about just over 900,000 in efficiencies from these 4 examples alone, for a net cost to the general fund of about $645,000. The themes of this budget really coalesce around 6. I'll talk about these really quickly. Recognising the workforce, investing in our children's future, continuing our commitment to public safety, enhancing the quality of life, diversifying and bolstering our economic base, and strengthening investment in infrastructure and technology. So really 2022, as you've heard from the board and Dr. Casey, is really the year of the workforce. Our employees have really stepped up to the challenge that's been presented to them over the last year, and this budget really recognises that and thanks them. From those that pivoted to other departments where there were greater needs because of COVID, to all the telehealth through our mental health services, and our frontline responders have really stepped up and showed the best and enduring qualities of the county's workforce. First point you see there is that this budget fully funds the public safety pay plan that was adopted in December as part of our 21 amendments. That cost $13.8 million in year 1. It covers over 1,300 employees. And then secondly, working with the school board superintendent and staff, it also includes funding to implement the teacher pay study, which impacts over 4,700 teachers and other staff, with raises for the most compressed teachers, those in the kind of middle parts of their career, going up by about 8 to 11%, with an average of 5.5%, which costs more than $23.2 million. So with those 2 initiatives together, that's over $37 million that's been reinvested back into the workforce, and it's started to remove that word compression from our vocabulary. For the rest of the workforce, there's a mid-year 2% merit. and it also restores all career development and training programs that we had to remove because of COVID. The other action that the board took the other night was to implement the third part of this study, which is a pay plan study for general government and other school employees. And the other part that I'd really like to point out here is all of this was really achievable through local dollars. We haven't relied on federal and state dollars to implement this. And we've also put policies in place to make sure that this is sustainable in the longer run. So then investing in our children's future, as I said before, but it bears repeating, the proposed budget that's before the board and the public fully funds the start of the teacher pay plan. Our local transfer to schools increasing over by $18 million in fiscal year 22, the largest increase in history. And the budget also includes $4 million for differentiated financial and staffing support, recognising that no two schools and no two students in the county are the same. With those investments in the pay plan and the differentiated support, we've been able to fund the two top priorities for the school system for fiscal year 22. And finally, there's also money in the budget for preventative and major maintenance, just under $1 million. That comes on the heels of the amendments that we made in fiscal year 21 of $58 million in the county's school major maintenance component, the largest investment we've made in history, which we were able to do because of the county's strong financial rating. With the pay plan, we're now been able to pivot more of our resources to the operations of the departments themselves, and that this budget does just that, and you can see some of the examples in the slides before you. For our fire services, we're including 20 positions for the new Midlothian fire station, adding a fire ladder truck and a medic to the system. The capital program for fire fully funds the replacement of Mintolica Fire Station in fiscal year 22, the oldest in the system at 69 years old. For the police department, it includes the implementation of the new deployment plan. First major upgrade to their command structure since 1989, 9 positions at $1.8 million. And it also includes the expansion of the police service aid program started in fiscal year 2020. And it also includes continuing funding for the grants position for the police department started in fiscal year 21. For the capital improvement for public safety, our referendum is proposing a $72 million investment, which will cover 4 police stations, 2 fire station replacements, and 2 fire renovations. And for our Sheriff's Office, it's proposing to add 4 additional positions to allow for staffing, flexibility, and facility maximisation, as well as some courthouse security enhancements over at the court system with everything that's happened over the last year. One of the themes that's really jumped out over the last 12 months is, the quality of life of all the residents in the county. Some of the events that we've taken for granted in the past have either been curtailed or still not able to happen. And, our libraries and our parks that you see in this chart here really stepped up and provided safe space for people to congregate. And so our libraries, for example, we're continuing the focus on the multi-year transition from the part-time to full-time ratio that I mentioned earlier. The budget for fiscal year 22 adds an additional 7 positions to that on top of the 10 that were included in the amendments for 21 for a total of 17 positions. And over the 5-year plan, the library staffing will increase from about 81 positions to 124, which is a 55% increase. On the capital side, the referendum includes $52 million to replace 2 libraries and to renovate an additional 2 libraries. And our park system, since 2011, our parks department has taken on an additional 19 sites, but in that time, not really received many positions. This budget includes $1.1 million to establish a new athletic field crew. And principal maintenance workers is the largest investment in park staffing in over a decade. And then in River City Sports Complex, you see there's $5.2 million in our capital plan to construct 2 new fields and maintain a turf replacement schedule. This comes on the heels of the $3 million that we included in the fiscal year 21 amendments. So in just 3 fiscal years, we're proposing to invest over $8 million in this complex, positioning it not just a regional leader in sports tourism, but on the eastern coast of the United States. And for our Parks Department, it includes $4.5 million to renovate the Old Beulah Elementary School, to create a parks headquarters and community centre and recreation space. And the capital plan, it doesn't only just include investments in parks and new areas, but also well-established neighbourhoods too. And one of the things that Mr. Harris touched on, diversifying and bolstering our economic base. The fiscal year 22 budget fully funds the complete zoning ordinance rewrite, the first major update since 1970. The businesses that we are trying to attract today are drastically different from those of long ago, and with this zoning ordinance rewrite should help to attract those businesses and hopefully workers to come to Chesterfield County. The plan's also mindful of businesses and what's happened over the last 12 months, the burdens that they've faced. One of the big things in this budget is targeted tax relief for businesses. That includes raising the exemption threshold for our business license tax from 300,000 to 400,000 people, which would exempt an additional 400 businesses and reduce that tax burden on another 3,200 county businesses. For our personal property, we are proposing to raise the exemption from $1,000 to $1,500, the first such adjustment since 1998, which will help alleviate the personal property bill on approximately 14,000 vehicles within the county. And then also proposing to expand tax relief for the elderly and disabled citizens by factoring inflation into income eligibility. And one of the components of that, the 100% threshold relief, the income for that would be rising from $28,000 to $31,500, and also includes cost of living adjustments in future years, so that people who qualify for the program today won't be negatively impacted by any changes going forward. But we're also proposing to introduce a $3,000 cap to this program, recognising that the increase of the cost of this program in the future, but also making sure that the relief goes to those who need it the most. For our infrastructure, we are proposing $19 million over the next 5 years to promote community connectivity. It's the largest investment we've ever made to promote spaces for people to walk in their neighbourhoods in the county as a whole. The plan also reflects a new funding source, the Central Virginia Transportation Authority. Over 5 years, that is expected to generate an additional $116+ million. Without this funding source, many of the projects that we've identified in the back of our book as unfunded projects may have remained dormant for a few more years, but with this new funding source, we're able to kickstart some of those projects. The budget, as always, continues to adhere to all our major maintenance policies, and it sets the foundation for the 2022 referendum for the county and schools. Recognising the scale of this capital investment, on the operations side, we're proposing to add additional positions to help with that workload, especially in our capital projects office and building and grounds over the next few years. This slide shows you some more details of that transportation program. In fiscal year 22, we're proposing $43.1 million over the 5-year plan, $211, and to put that in perspective, that's about 44% of our entire CIP over that horizon, and with some of the projects you can see there on the right-hand side. And finally, in this slide, I'd like to point out, you'll see the revenue sharing component at the bottom. We always look to maximise dollars where we can get sharing matches from the state. Over the 5-year plan, that comes to about $50 million.
Thank you, Mr. Durkin. Just to stop here and take a little pause and talk about the referendum, because as I mentioned earlier, this is the third one of these we've done, and I think that's been the bulk of the questions around the referendum. We haven't done it, so what's a referendum? We talk about that like everyone is supposed to know that term. It's a fancy way or a reference to an overall bond package. So we take a slate of projects, capital improvements, the brick and mortar of our business here in Chesterfield County from a local government perspective. We take that slate of projects and we put it in front of the voters for their approval. If approved at the ballot, then we're able to go out and borrow money at the lowest cost possible. You've probably heard us talk about our bond rating. It's akin to a household's credit ratings. You have 3 credit scores from those major agencies. We have the same thing. Different agencies, same idea, same kinds of scores, and we have a perfect credit rating as an entity. Actually, on the general government side, as well as the utilities. There are less than 5 communities nationwide that can say that, to have a perfect credit rating really for their entire operation. So Chesterfield County, very, very fortunate to have that. It allows us to borrow money, again, at the lowest cost possible, which at the end of the day saves taxpayer money, and it allows us to do more projects and do them in a quicker fashion. So it's a very, very relevant topic. But we can only access that lowest of low credit ratings, or excuse me, interest rates, if approved by the voters. So we only do this every, let's say, 8 to 10 years. We approve a long list of projects, or the voters approve a long list of projects, and then we go out and execute them. We haven't done one since 2013, and that was a little bit scaled back on the general government side. Depending on where you live in the county, you've probably seen a lot of the impacts of the school referendum, which focused primarily at the elementary school level. A lot of elementaries have been rebuilt. There was one new, Old 100 Elementary, being in the Midlothian district, being a good example of a new school that came out of that 2013 referendum. But it's time to do one again. And we had talked tentatively a year ago, prior to COVID, that this upcoming November of 2021 would be a good time to do that, to go back out to the voters and propose that. We feel that everything that's transpired over the course of the last year, that we would push that window off 12 months to November of 2022 to bring that large bond package back to the voters for approval. That by no means, so I think the first question, the concern that a lot of folks have is that project in my neighborhood, my school, whatever it might be, now it's getting pushed back, and what are the impacts on that? And that's a fair question, but I think what we have attempting to do here is to say there's a lot of work that still needs to be done prior to a referendum. There's a lot of design work. We need to finalize and really zero in on what that project listing would be that we would take to the voters. So we really want to make sure all of our homework is done. So the 18 months or so between now and November of 22 will go by very quickly, but it won't be wasted time. There's a lot of work that can be done to make sure that when we go out in the late summer of calendar year 22, we have a very crisp, clean, and understandable bond package that the public's behind, and we put it on the ballot, that it ultimately will be approved. So a lot to do, and the fact that projects were delayed because of COVID. So there's only so many projects that you can work on at a single time. We had a lot of things that were in motion a year ago. That's an easy way to save money. We put the pause button on a lot of things, so all that's coming back to life. This will give us a chance to make sure that all of our projects, county or schools, are completed, all the ones that had been entrusted to us previously, before we go out and ask for approval on new funding. That being said, a referendum is a major thing. We're anticipating this is going to be somewhere around a $450 million referendum. That could grow if economic conditions improve over the course of the next 12 months or so. But right now, we wanted to use this time, and you're going to continue to hear from us more and more community dialogues, hopefully a few in-persons before it's all over, but to really take our time, be deliberate about what those projects are. When you only do something every 8 to 10 years, you can't afford not to get it right. So what you're looking at on this slide is a thumbnail sketch of what a general government referendum would look like. And this is everything but schools is the simplest way to look at it. And you see a layout here beginning in fiscal 23 all the way through 29. You usually have about 7 to 8 years to execute the projects. And you see a nice mix down in a little table down in the bottom right-hand corner. $150 million on the county side. The school's tentatively organized around $300 million. But you see a nice balance, a nice mix, and I think it's really representative and an extension of what Mr. Durkin talked about in his remarks, having those quality of life components, parks and libraries mixed in with the public safety and the roads. There's a smaller piece of roads, but as Mr. Durkin just talked about, with the additional funding sources that have been added there, including the Central Virginia Transportation Authority, we have, just over the next 5 years, over $200 million of transportation funding, which is a referendum in and of itself without having to go out and bond for that. So the the board, working with their state partners, have done a great job. Our transportation funding in Chesterfield County has never been in a better position than it is now. It doesn't mean there isn't more to do, but we really feel very good about that. So you see less representation for roads here. That's not a reflection of the fact that we think roads aren't important. We've just got that handled in another way. Parks, libraries, fire stations, and police stations, something you haven't seen from us in recent referendums. We are in leased arrangements in all of our stations now. We would like to convert those to own opportunities. They pay themselves off and make that investment a wise one in a very short window. What you see here is not specific projects, although we're starting to get a handle on that. What you really see is a rhythm of what a referendum would look like, where it's a fire station, police station, essentially, and then you have a quality of life year, a public safety year, a quality of life year, a public safety year, so forth and so on. That's how we would spread it out. Again, you don't want to borrow all that money up front because then those mortgage payments come due, but this starts to give you a sense of what we're thinking about from a programmatic mix for a general government referendum. I don't have a slide for the school referendum, but I think they are starting to zero in again around that $300 million number. And this would be, a logical progression from the 2013 program, which was almost exclusively focused at the elementary level. Now they're coming back and saying, we need to do some work at the middle school level, around capacity issues, as well as some aging facility considerations. It'll still have a few elementary projects, perhaps mixed in there, maybe some major maintenance. But the simplest way to think of it is an elementary referendum. Now we head to the middle, and high school improvements or considerations probably sits mostly in the next referendum down the line, which again will be here before you know. But that's a general sense of what that is. But the main message on this tonight is, just because there's not a referendum scheduled for November of 21, it by no means suggests we aren't very active in the capital space. It's been said a couple of times here tonight, but our largest investment in major maintenance happened this past September. Didn't have a referendum associated. We can still be very active in this space by just being smart and looking for opportunities. So we will continue to be very active in our physical plant, but it just from a referendum perspective, probably better timed next year. Mentioned here, this is a sense of water and sewer rates and how we stack up. You see, we talked about just a second ago that our utility system, one of the, a handful, less than 5, to have that perfect credit rating, along with the general government in the entire United States. And you see the benefits of that here. The proposed rates for Chesterfield County, that's combined water and sewer for an average user on a monthly basis at $59.17. That's $1.50 average increase. They do go up, on a typical basis. Last year did not for COVID, but $1.50 is what's proposed for a monthly increase. Even with that increase shown in this chart, you can see how we stack up against our regional peers, and we're considerably lower, and a lot of that has to do with that excellent financial planning, Mr. Hayes, and just being proactive in the way we approach this space. So there's a small increase proposed for water and sewer, but again, will still make us the lowest in the region. Looking ahead, and this is something we've not touched on, but I think it bears taking a pause and diving into it a little bit, is the CARES topic. So CARES is the federal stimulus funding, effectively, that has been made available in a couple of instances to state governments, local governments, and even to direct households. We received some of that ourselves. We received our first amount this past fall, about a little over $61 million. Again, we had a work session on that today on how that was invested. But there are more dollars that have been approved by Washington, D.C. that are going to show up here in Chesterfield County, probably about $69 million in total. We don't have an exact plan for what we're going to do with that yet because we don't have the rule book. We've just been made aware of this, but I think the thing that we want everyone to understand is none of those dollars are wrapped up into this plan. We are not counting on those stimulus dollars, those one-time stimulus dollars, to make any of the things that Mr. Durkin talked about in the detailed section of his presentation, to make those things possible. So whatever comes in, whatever the final number is for CARES for round 2, whatever the rule book is, that will be almost a subsequent little mini side budget process. Perhaps we'll come back on Facebook Live and sort of share what our thoughts are as we did with the first round, but nothing we're doing here, none of the pay plans, none of the investment in infrastructure, none of the record investment in schools is because of those CARES dollars. We're really treating that as a separate thing. And that's important because those dollars aren't going to be there year in and year out. And we want to make sure we're not getting, addicted to that one-time money, if you will, knowing that it's not going to be there for us the next year. So we will keep that in a one-time space. We will keep to understand what the community's thought process is on that. We were able to do a lot of small business grants, daycare grants, food bank assistance, utility payment assistance, a lot of things were a very diverse mix of investment from that first round, and we'll model a lot of that, I think, again, as we get the rule book for round two. But just keep that in mind. More will be coming back, so I don't want to confuse those two pieces, but that's another question that we've gotten in prior Facebook Lives is, well, how much of that federal money is in this budget? And, we're proud to say the answer is zero. We'll finish up with our virtual community meetings early next week in this room, March 24th. We will have our public hearings, which again is a chance in a face-to-face opportunity to come and talk to all 5 board members about what your thoughts or priorities, feedback, whatever it might be about the budget. If you don't want to come out in public, we understand that that's still a lot of folks that would rather stay at home. We have a whole host of virtual opportunities in addition to these Facebook Lives at blueprint@chesterfield.gov. That's our email address. That's up 24 hours a day. You can email a question, just something that wasn't clear in the presentation or something we think we should include or just a comment, whatever you want to do. You can email that, comes to a bunch of us, and we will get back to you. There's actually also an online feedback form that you can fill out if you'd rather do that. Again, we have 2 more of these Facebook Lives next week. They all have a magisterial district notation, but they are free to attend regardless of where you live. So if your schedule works better, if you have a neighbor that missed tonight and they want to participate or ask a question, they can come to either one of those, the 22nd, 23rd, and then again, we culminate the public input process more or less on the 24th, followed by budget adoption. So there's a nice 2-week or so break in there where the board gets to take and synthesize all of the feedback that they've received over this 45-day period and then bring amendments back in this room on April 7th and make any tweaks based on things that they are hearing. So again, this is a very important exercise, an important time in the process to hear from you, and we are ready to do that. So I'm going to flip it over here, and we're going to see if we've got a few questions from the audience that we can jump into. First up, and again, these are general questions that we've received, some of these in prior sessions, some of these tonight, but a question about sidewalk funding. And I think this is, Mr. Durkin talked about it during his time, but what are those factors that influence any particular financial plan? And one of the things that we really heard loud and clear from COVID is the importance of having sidewalks, trails, that connectivity amongst neighborhoods, to schools, to commercial centers, whatever it is. Folks really, felt the need to get out, get some fresh air. And so this budget ramps up doubles our sidewalk spending in the first year from $1 million to $2 million and increases that to $5 million a year by the end of this 5-year plan. So that's just a specific dedicated sidewalk line. There's other opportunities, other transportation monies where we can go out and leverage local dollars for grants, but this is the largest just dedicated local investment in sidewalks, and we call it our community connectivity. If you look through a budget document, you see that term. It's just a broader sense of trails, anything where it's pedestrian focused, where they can get out, get some fresh air, get some exercise, be active. That's something we heard loud and clear, and this budget clearly responds to that. We have a question here from Aaron. And I'll just read it out loud so that everybody can follow along. What is the internal mechanism in place for continued evaluation of salary competitiveness amongst all CCPS staff, especially considering the announcement made by a neighboring jurisdiction in terms of their pay increase? And that's a fair question, Aaron. So I think a couple of thoughts, and I don't know if Ms. Haley wants to weigh in as well, but the main goal of this investment in our education workforce was around compression. That's a goal that Ms. Haley in particular really helped to spearhead several years ago. We put the study out last year around this time. We got the results, and we went out not chasing anybody else, but making sure that we, as I think it's been said here tonight, trying to eliminate that word compression from our vocabulary. So absolutely, that was the goal, and I think without any question, using some of the best consultants that we could find, we've achieved that. Now, that being said, public safety, education, general government, any employee group, we're always going to make sure that there's some competitiveness moving forward. But for this year, we achieved our goal, and I think you will see, as it is every year, that's a question that comes back up. There's no guarantees, there's no automatics, but we are going to maintain a certain competitive place in the regional marketplace. We always have, we always will. This year was about really that compression topic. Second question, on a similar topic, there was a lot of discussion last year about the rainy day fund. I understand it is neither revenue nor expenditure. What is it? Was it utilized to offset any of the losses during COVID? So a good question, and that did come up quite a bit last year when we were going through this exercise, because really the conversation was, how do we minimize the impact? Every locality, every state, any organization that was going through a budget process was trying to figure out exactly how to limit those impacts on operations. Rainy day is kind of, for us, is kind of that last line of defense. We were able to put together a plan at this time last year with what we knew about COVID that cut over $52 million out of the original proposal and still invested $10 million more in the school division. So no, we did not have to use any of those rainy day funds. We wanted to have that there as that, again, that firewall against the unknown for COVID. It wasn't a traditional recession where we can go back and say, well, the last 3 times this happened, here's the arc of that, here's how quickly it came back, here's the duration, all those factors, and make a very, very, calculated plan. So we put every expenditure control in place that we could possibly think of on the general government side, left fund balance in place, rainy day funds, if we needed them. If COVID had continued, if that unemployment had continued to spike into the 20s, then that's a possibility, but we would have had it there to draw on, but we wanted to make sure that we could sustain it for the long run by really looking at the expenditure side as opposed to putting it in on the revenue side, and that's what it is. Rainy day is revenue. It's one-time revenue. It's your savings account. Forget the local government speak. It's your savings account. And every household in Chesterfield County pretty much had to think at the beginning of COVID, how are we going to get through this if we lose a job, my income goes down, whatever the case might be. And the question becomes, do I throttle back my expenditures, or do I just start spending savings accounts day one? For us, we said we're going to throttle back expenses, hold that savings if this thing gets really out of hand. Fortunately, again, it was a short duration. We didn't have to spend any of those rainy day funds, and they're still there for us today moving forward. So I think that was the right play. Next question.
And Mr. Harris, can I just add to that? I think it's really important for folks to understand that the maintenance of that rainy day fund and the way in which we use the rainy day fund definitely has an impact on our AAA bond rating. And so certainly, being very prudent about how we look at that money and how we consider touching that money definitely reflects on, the aspects of what the fiscal responsibilities are of the county and that valuation, just to sort of clarify that, because I've sometimes heard that from folks in the community as well as to, the real value of maintaining that fund.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Next question up here. It's a good one. We've gotten probably in each one of the sessions. What is the proposed tax rate on real estate with the increased assessments, and sort of how is that being factored in, essentially, is the question. So the proposed budget brought forward by the county administrator, what's before you tonight, what's before the Board of Supervisors, is proposed at 95 cents, which is our current existing tax rate. So the rate does not change. That's flat, has been for a number of years. What does increase admittedly so, is the average tax bill for a homeowner in Chesterfield County. Again, on average, you might be high, might be low, depending on the price point of your home, but on average, about a 4.25% increase. And again, that's driven off of arm's length market sale or market data. We reassess each year. We try to use sales data all the way up through about Halloween, maybe into mid-November, and we use all of that to set the values for the next year. They're effective January the 1st. Everybody gets that letter in the mail, and they see what their house has gone up. So for us, on an average basis, that's about 4.25%. So the average tax bill does increase by that amount. It's not on the rate side, but it's on the equity side. It's on the value of the home. So it's not proposed to go down. So again, that average bill will go up, but that's what makes everything that you've seen here tonight possible. That is our dominant revenue source. Property taxes, specifically real estate taxes, and specifically within that category, existing home prices. And it was a very good year in Chesterfield County. The home sale activity in the county at an all-time high. Again, people want to come here. They want to stay here. You've probably all seen a house in your neighborhood that's gone on the market, and as soon as they can get the sign up, it's coming back down. And we definitely saw that. But again, from a home price appreciation perspective, there's been sustainable increases. 05, 06, 07, 08, if you remember that time period, home values were going up double-digit increases, something that wasn't sustainable. We've said for a very long time that we believe between 3% and 4% is really what we need to have healthy growth in the budget to be able to deliver the programs and services that the Board of Supervisors gets asked to invest in. So we're right on the upper edge of that range, and something that the county administrator keeps a keen eye on to make sure that if 4% begins to repeat itself or it starts to creep north of there, I think absolutely, and all of our documents suggest that continuing to keep an eye on that rate and make an offset on that rate if we continue to see larger than expected increases or increases, again, at the top end of that range. So over this 5-year plan, that's something that we will continue to keep an eye on. And we talked about it already. That $13.6 million of state revenue expenses that are having an impact on us, that's 4 cents on the rate. This, budget feels very differently at 91 cents or something there in the middle. So, but again, it's a solemn promise from the administration. I think I can speak from the board as well that we will continue to keep an eye on that rate and make sure that it's competitive and that we're not overburdening our citizens. That being said, this budget does have the largest and broadest tax relief package of anyone that we've passed here in Chesterfield County. So certainly looking for ways to give back, but in a more targeted fashion so far for fiscal year 2022. That being said, I'm not seeing any other question. One more question coming in. So give us 1 second here.
And if I just might add a comment to that as well regarding the tax rate, I think that this board is looking at this as a very fiscally conservative perspective. And I will say that, while we have seen this increase this year, we're definitely looking forward to what the sustainability of that is and what the overall impact of this pandemic is. So I think that we need to be incredibly mindful of looking at this a little bit in the longer term than making any kind of adjustment right now. I think that that's the conversation going on with this board, but as Mr. Harris referenced, we certainly are looking at, what a continued spectrum would be if we continue to come in at that 4% rate or so. So I think that's a worthy conversation that you'll see us continue to have.
Scrubbing the Facebook, I think everything that's coming in now is something we've probably already touched on or covered in some way. So we will continue as we always do for the rest of the night. If there's any other questions that come in on the Facebook account, on the email, or on the online form, we will get those answers directly out to those individuals. And certainly if there's a question that comes in just 10 minutes after we usually try to begin the sessions next week with those and make sure that, because again, a lot of folks having the same questions, so we will work those into a future town hall if it comes in after that. That being said, with no more questions, we appreciate, and they've all gone about this same time. We're right at an hour. But again, thank you for participating. At 7:30, you can still have a pretty nice St. Patrick's Day from now on out. So we wish you a happy and safe St. Patrick's Day, and we'll be in touch and see you very soon. Thanks a lot.
And if I can just add the same and just remind folks that we have a public hearing next Wednesday, and so that allows you to come in person on the 24th, or it also allows you to go through the portal and provide comments, and we are all very dedicated to making certain that we are reading those comments and as appropriate, maybe responding, answering questions to those as well. But remember, those comments also become a part of the public record of that meeting, of the public hearing. So please don't hesitate to use that portal if that's more convenient or just feels like a safer alternative. And then no action will be taken until our April 7th meeting, at which point in time we will adopt a budget. So stay tuned for comments on that as well. So for all of those of you who have joined us tonight or will then later have access to this, please feel free again to use any of these opportunities to reach out with questions or to just call one of us on the board individually as well. So thanks so much. Happy St. Patrick's Day, and hope you all have a great night.